Hey folks, today we're going to do just a quick review of linear functions and slope. All of the stuff that we're doing this week is pretty much a review, so this should be familiar to you. Nothing should really jump out as unfamiliar. So let's do a quick review of slope. Slope is just what? When you're thinking about slope, you always think rise over run. That's what most people say. But what does that actually mean? We're talking about the steepness of a line, right? When we're talking about linear functions, we're talking about the steepness. Sometimes you'll hear the term rate of change when you're talking about slope. And as we move on in pre-calc, and we start probably closer to the end of the year when we start doing more of an introduction to calculus, you'll see how not only are we finding slope of a line, we can eventually find the slope of a curve at a point, and that gets into a whole different set of things. We were just doing the difference quotient the other day, and that comes into play when we start to get into more calculus stuff. But let's stick with slope of a line today. Remember, there's different types of slope you can have depending on the type of line that you have. There's actually 4 different scenarios for slope. If these are our axes, right, we could have a line that is rising or increasing. The slope there would be positive. You could have a line that's, some people refer to it as a falling line, also decreasing, and that means your slope is less than 0. When you have a horizontal line, you have a 0 slope, so slope is equal to 0. And when you have a vertical line, so let's say I have a vertical line, my slope is undefined. So those are the different 4 different scenarios you can have for slope. Remember, when you are determining slope, if these are your axes and here is your line, you have 2 points on your line. If this point here is, and this point here, here's x2, y2, and this point is x1, comma y1. When you do slope, remember you're doing the change in y over the change in x. And so you would have y2 minus y1 is equal to x2 minus x1. And people always ask, well, why do you have to do the y2 and the x2 first? And honestly, you don't have to do this point first, as long as you're always consistent. If you start with y2 on the top, make sure you start with x2 on the bottom. If you start with y1 on the top, make sure you start with x1 on the bottom. As long as you're consistent, it doesn't really matter the order that those are in. Okay, but that's how we find slope. Change in y over change in x, and we have our 4 different scenarios for slope. Let's talk about point slope form of a line. When we are dealing with points and we don't know the y-intercept, right, we just have the point and the slope, or we just have 2 points, then we would use point slope form for a line. And for those who don't remember what that is, y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1, okay, where m is our slope and x1, y1 is our point that we'd be substituting in. So for example, if I have the points 4, 1 and -2, -7, or let's go with +7. Okay, so if those are my points, my slope, remember, is change in y over change in x, which would give me 7 minus 1 over -2 minus 4, and that would give me 6 over -6, which reduces to -1. And now for point slope form, it doesn't matter which point we use because the final outcome would be exactly the same. So I'm just going to use this first point here. If I'm plugging into my formula, I have y minus 1 is equal to -1 times x minus 4. And you can leave it like that, or you can go through and distribute it and get it in terms of y. If I were to do that, I would have y minus 1 is equal to negative x plus 4. And so my final answer there would be negative x plus 5. Y equals negative x plus 5. And that would be the equation of my line. But that's point slope form. Make sure that if that sort of slipped out of your mind, that you go back and review that. Make sure that you know it. It is going to come up a lot as we go through these different pre-calc units that we're doing. Okay. Also, let's talk about slope-intercept form of a line. This one is probably more familiar to you. It's the first one that you learned. It's the one that tends to be used most often. Y equals mx plus b. Again, m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. So anytime you see an equation in this form, you can easily identify the slope and the y-intercept. Pretty straightforward. You're given a slope and you're given the y-intercept. You're just plugging it in. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. As far as some other things having to do with lines, make sure that you understand how to use those formulas. Make sure that you understand how to graph your points, how to graph your lines. And on the next video, we'll get into the general form of the equation of a line. But this is just a quick introduction, a really short video with review of lines and slope and different equations of lines. We'll see you next time.